In the war for the Arctic, a penguin will rise. This is Game Gear Express. The Game Gear made its worldwide debut in Japan with 3 launch titles, and we previously covered the other 2. But whenever a new system debuts, there's always 1 or 2 rather forgettable games that only serve to pad out the launch lineup. Such is the case for today's episode, as Sega dips into its distant past and brings us Pengo, a port of an arcade game from way back in 1982. That's right, a game from the Atari 2600 era was used as a launch title right next to Columns and Super Monaco GP. Incidentally, it's also the first Game Gear cartridge not to see a US release, as it was only exported to Europe a year after its initial appearance in Japan. Back in 1982, Sega's Pengo was one of many maze chase games spawned in the wake of Pac-Man's success, though it tried to stand out from the pack with a few innovative features. The game played decently enough, and also featured a cool background theme, which was a remix of the 1972 synth pop hit Popcorn by Hot Butter. While it saw some ports to the Atari systems at the time, Pengo was all but forgotten before too long. Yet 8 years later, Sega saw fit to dig it up for the Game Gear, virtually unchanged from its arcade run back in 1982. That's not to say that filling out a handheld console's library with ports of 1980s arcade games was unheard of at the time. The Game Boy catalog certainly contains its share of old arcade conversions, but many of those ports were updated with modern features, such as varied environments, different enemy types, password saves, and so forth. Pengo sadly doesn't follow that pattern, as Sega didn't even try to modernize it for the supposedly advanced handheld. It's essentially the same game that was played on the Atari 2600 back in the day. Anyway, you play as Pengo himself on a mission to defend his frozen homeland from the evil snow bees. Each level consists of a maze made up of ice blocks which can push around Sokoban style, and the apparently frictionless blocks will slide until they run into something. Basically, your job is to exterminate the snow bees by pushing the ice blocks into them, and thus crushing them against another block or the wall. Pengo has a few other defenses, such as shaking the walls themselves, which will stun any snow bees hanging near them and allowing you to trample them. The snow bees have also hidden eggs in certain blocks, which will hatch to take their place, but you can smash the block containing the eggs before they hatch and denying them their birth. One touch from a snow bee is lethal, and the longer you take, the more aggressive they become, even dissolving any ice blocks standing in their way. Once all the snow bees are eliminated, you're awarded bonus points based on how fast you cleared the level, then it's on to the next screen for another round of Arctic survival. Pengo has 64 total stages, though in reality your main goal is to shoot for that high score, which was such an achievement back in the day. Each stage also has 3 diamond blocks that can't be destroyed, and if you can line all 3 together, you'll immobilize all the snow bees on the screen while getting treated to a nice effect, as well as some massive bonus points. The gameplay is pretty faithful to the coin-op, and the controls are simple enough since both buttons do the same thing. They may seem slippery at times, especially when you try to move around, but they do their job for the most part. This port even features the cute little penguin dances after every 2 levels. The visuals do resemble the arcade graphics despite a lighter color scheme and a few compromises. Sega obviously had to shrink the sprites down to fit everything under the small Game Gear screen, and while the results are serviceable, all the characters look a little squished. But like many other 1980s arcade games, the first level pretty much shows everything you're going to see in this game. Other than the layout of the ice blocks and some added snow bees, every round is the same before it with nothing new introduced down the line. Not surprisingly, the background music was changed from the arcade version, though I'm not sure whether it's due to legal reasons or not. In any case, the replacement track isn't as fun as the Popcorn song, but it still fits well with the action and is rather catchy to boot. Sadly, Pengo's main issue is the gameplay just doesn't have the timeless addictiveness of the all-time classics like Pac-Man and Galaga. You just push blocks and smash snowbees over and over, trying to get a high score until you get bored of it, which won't take long. Not to mention you can't even save your high score, almost making the whole exercise pointless. Even if you somehow endure and pass level 64, your only reward is a quick congratulations screen before the game continues indefinitely. I'm not saying Pengo is a bad game, it's decent enough for what it is, and provides a nice fix for those craving some quick arcade action. It'll certainly delight those who enjoyed the game back in the day. But the fact is, what may have worked in the Atari 2600 era doesn't quite hold up in the 90s. Not to mention similar block pushing games with more advanced features have come along since. With nothing to really help it stand out, Pengo comes off as nothing more than filler that's fun for a bit, but ultimately forgettable.